When you look at a city, what do you really see? We often think of the concrete and steel, but that's really only half the story. Today we're going to explore the two sides of every city, the physical blueprint they're built on, and the complex human software that runs within it. Let's get into it.
So, let's just start with a really big question. When you picture a city, what comes to mind? Is it the towering skyscrapers and all the bustling streets? Or do you see millions of individual stories, connections, and conflicts all playing out at once? Well, the truth is, it's both.
And that brings us to our core idea for today. Think of a city like a computer. The physical hardware is all the stuff you can actually touch, the buildings, the roads, the power grids. But the software, that's the invisible code that makes it all run. The culture, the social rules, the millions of daily interactions. And just like a computer, you can't really understand the software without knowing the hardware it's running on.
Okay, so let's start with the hardware. We're going to dive into this fascinating field called Ekistics, which is essentially the science of how we build our world.
So Ekistics isn't just about, drawing blueprints for buildings or laying out streets. It's about seeing all of that as one big interconnected science. The science of why and how we build our towns and cities the way we do.
The brain behind this whole idea was a Greek planner named Constantinos Doxiadis. Way back in the 1940s, he argued that we needed a much more holistic way to study the places we live.
Doxiadis believed that every single human settlement, and I mean everything from a tiny little hamlet to a sprawling metropolis, is built from just 5 essential elements. And if you get one of them wrong, the whole system starts to fail.
And here they are. It all starts with nature, the land, the water, the climate. Then comes Anthropos. That's just Greek for human, the individual. Then, of course, individuals form a society. We then build shells, our homes, our offices, our buildings. And finally, we connect everything with networks, things like roads, power lines, and the internet. Now, the key insight from Doxiadis is that all 5 have to be in balance. You can't just focus on the buildings and ignore nature, because the society will ultimately suffer.
Now, what's really wild about this framework is how these 5 elements can be used to build settlements of almost any size imaginable. So, how does that scaling actually work?
Doxiadis mapped this all out in what he called the Ekistic Units of scale. It starts with the single individual, Anthropos. A person needs a room, then a house. Houses group together to form neighborhoods, which grow into a polis, or city. Cities then merge into a metropolis, then a sprawling megalopolis. But his ultimate, almost science fiction endpoint was the Ecumenopolis, a single, continuous city that spans the entire planet. Just try to imagine that.
Okay, so that pretty much covers the city's hardware. But what about the software? Let's switch gears and explore the social life that runs on this physical blueprint, the human side of the city.
And this is the realm of urban sociology. It asks the really big questions. How does living packed together with millions of strangers actually change us? How does the city shape our relationships, our identity, and even our state of mind?
One of the biggest ideas in this field is that the very act of living in a city fundamentally changes the way we relate to one another. It shifts us from what you might call a community to a society.
This idea comes from a sociologist named Ferdinand Tönnies, and he gave us 2 really key concepts. First, you have Gemeinschaft, which basically means community. Think of a small rural village where you know everyone, and your relationships are personal, based on family and tradition. Then there's Gesellschaft, which means society, and that's the city. Here, a lot of our relationships are transactional. You're a customer, they're a barista. You interact, but you don't really know each other on a deep level.
Building on that idea, another sociologist, Louis Wirth, argued that urbanism isn't just a place you live. It's a complete way of life that the city itself creates.
So, according to Wirth, this urban way of life is shaped by 3 key factors. First, the sheer size of the population, which makes it totally impossible to know everyone. Second, the density of it. We're physically close to strangers all the time. And third, the heterogeneity, which is just a fancy word for the incredible diversity of people and lifestyles all mixed together in one place.
So, what's the result of all this?
Well, Wirth argued it leads to way more of those secondary relationships, the kind we saw in Gesellschaft. And yeah, this can sometimes lead to feelings of social isolation. But here's the thing. It's a double-edged sword. That very same anonymity also gives us an incredible amount of individual freedom to be who we want to be, away from the watchful eyes of a small community.
Another really important group, the Chicago School of Sociology, thought of the city as a kind of living, social organism. They studied how different groups and neighborhoods competed for resources and space, almost like different species in an ecosystem. This led to things like the concentric zone model, which shows how a city tends to naturally sort itself into different zones.
So, we've looked at the hardware through the lens of Ekistics and the software through urban sociology. Now, let's put these two powerful lenses together to get the full picture.
So here is your takeaway toolkit. To really understand any city, you need to look at its physical blueprint, its ekistics, and you have to look at the social experience that blueprint creates, its urban sociology.
Because the crucial point here is this. A city is a system where everything is connected. The physical shells we build and the networks that link them together directly shape the kind of society we become. The hardware dictates the software, and in turn, the software demands changes from the hardware. It's a constant feedback loop.
And that brings us to one final thought. If Doxiadis was right, and we are slowly, maybe inevitably, building towards a single, planet-wide city, an ecumenopolis, then the choices we make about its design are more important than ever. So the question is, what kind of social software do we want to run on that global hardware? What kind of community will we choose to build?